we're just gonna get going here. If you were here last week, how many of you guys were here last week? Okay, so we're building off of what we taught on last week, which is to be a disciple of Jesus is to be an apprentice of Jesus. It is not something where you just join a club or a new hobby. To follow Jesus is to reorganize your whole life unto following him. Amen. And that's good. That's good news. John Mark Comer, he said, if discipleship is something that is done to you, a verb, then that puts the onus of responsibility for your spiritual formation on someone else, like your pastor, your church, or your mentor. But if discipleship is a noun, if it's someone you are or are not, then no one can disciple you but Rabbi Jesus himself. Our job as Christians, right? We call ourselves Christians, little Christ. It's to follow Jesus. And in that word follow in the Bible, where we say, I am a follower, it means I am an apprentice of his way, not my way. Okay? Last week, I showed the video of Lydia bungee jumping. So if you missed last week, you missed it. Lydia went bungee jumping, and I talked about how you can't watch somebody else bungee jump and sit there on the side and go, oh yeah, that's nice. I went out to the gondola with her. I'm a bungee jumper too. No, you're not a bungee jumper until you thrust your whole life out into the air and bungee jump, right? In the same way, as a disciple, you are not a disciple unless you are actively being discipled by Jesus himself, following after his way and not your way. So ultimately, the choice is always yours to follow Lydia out to the gondola, watch her truly live, move, and have her being in the new way of life. And then you have the choice of either being a spectator like me, who did not bungee jump, or fully living like her. But this is where we make the greatest mistake. We call ourselves bungee jumpers while having never thrust ourselves out of the gondola as majestic creatures of faith and trust. I gave a quote of Dallas Willard where he says, the greatest issue facing the world today with all its heartbreaking needs is whether those who are identified as Christians will become disciples, or students, apprentices, practitioners of Jesus Christ, steadily learning from him how to live the life of the kingdom of heaven into every corner of their human existence. Wow. Amazing. And so we began to make a rule of life for our time. How do we live our life? I went over like this idea of a rule of life. And a rule of life is really like guide rails for a train. It's what keeps the train on its tracks so that all the inertia and momentum of that train is moving in the right direction. And how many know that direction is Jesus? It's not the clearing. It's not things going on here. It's him. And so that rule of life, it's like an anchor for a boat. Like it makes it so that when the winds come and the waves grow and things like that, you are steadily anchored on a way of life that says otherwise. Okay, that's what a rule of life is. And so a rule of life is not a bunch of different practices that transform you. It's not to say, oh, if you pray enough, it'll transform you. If you have Sabbath enough, it'll transform you. If you fast enough, it'll transform you. No, a rule of life is something that leads you and guides your time in your life to Jesus so that he can transform you. Otherwise, it's religion. Otherwise, it's, I would say lifeless religion. James has a good version of religion that he calls true religion. Otherwise, it's lifeless religion. It's going through practices that do not lead to transformation. Our prayer, our worship that we do on Sunday mornings, how we seek the Lord, it's not for the sake of a practice. It's a means to an end, and the means to the end is Jesus. Come on. Are you guys awake? Yeah? So this week, I want to get into this rule of life of time. How do we spend our time? And more importantly, how do we spend our screen time? This is something that I think it's gone far too long, even in our church, which, I mean, we're only 2 years old. But for a church to not talk about screen time, I feel like we're irrelevant. in the sense of like there's things happening in every single one of our lives. And most of us, how many of you are carrying a mobile device right now? A mobile glowing rectangle, okay? And I'm not like, many of us, we need these, right, to do our jobs. Like I need this currently to do my job, both here and when I go back to work tomorrow for my full-time job. Like I need this. I can't do my job without it. I hate even saying that because I don't want to need it. But now life and culture has shifted in a way that it requires it if you're supposed to run a business like Billy. You know, Billy's answering phone calls for tree service. We've got Bev and Al who are answering phones and text messages and things like that for birthday cakes. And many of us, you've got Nate here, he gets called by his cell phone to go get called in so that no one dies in the cath lab, right? It's important, but here's the deal. When we have our phones with us, we carry the world with us. Every element, every facet of the world now is in this size and can fit in your pocket. And so the issue of life right now is that we are the most distracted generation of all time because everything in our lives, both good and bad, is demanding attention from us in this. It demands our attention from our work, from our kids, from news and entertainment. And we all, if you're a millennial or younger, you probably know what FOMO means. FOMO is fear of missing out. And a lot of the hooks and the things that get into our hearts, it's the news articles or it's social media, and it's things that teach us, if you don't get this notification, if you don't get this post, you're missing out on information that's valuable. It needs your attention, Lana, right? It needs it. If you don't know what's going on in the world, you'll be uneducated, unknowledgeable, right? But guess what? No one's saying that, but they are saying that. Okay, so I'm going to ask us to do something, and here's what I need you to do. Put everything that is throwable on the floor. I'm just kidding. You're going to want to throw something at me in a minute, so I want you to get it. I want you to put it on the ground before you can throw it at me. I want you to pick up your mobile device, and I want you to power it off right now. Okay? Here's the thing. Me asking you to do this, I'm not going to require it of you, but me asking you to take your phone and turn it off. What kind of anxiety is coming up right now in this room? Just make a note. Like, what kind of anxiety of, I need to know what's going on. I need to know who needs to reach me. I need to know what's happening on Instagram. I need to know. Right? If you're like me, that's hard. Okay? And maybe this is going to be a younger generation thing, but here's the deal. Older generation, we need your wisdom. Right? We need to know what it was like to not have a screen in front of us 24/7. Okay, so I'm going to ask that you turn off your phone. And I recognized in myself, this was hard because somewhere along the line, I made a covenant with my phone that said, you're welcome to invade every sacred space in my life. You can invade. You can interrupt my time with God. You can interrupt my time with worship. You can interrupt my time of being with my children where my son asks a question, but I'm just too busy. I made a covenant, a marriage with this thing that says, you are more important than you. And that is, we need a divorce here, right? Okay, I don't use that word lightly, but you understand what I'm saying. You are welcome to join me in turning off your phone this morning, unless you're Nate or somebody else on call, and if you need a call to save a life, then yes, leave your phone on. I don't want anybody dying because you didn't show up on call, okay? So I want to biopsy this for a second. If we take this phone, and what happens in the physician world, if they take something out of you and they hold it up to the light, they cut something out of you, they hold it up to the light and they go, what's going to happen if this is left alone? If we don't question this and we don't ask good questions of what happens if we leave this alone and let it continue to grow in our lives. If we don't form any boundaries around this thing, what's going to happen to us and to the people around us? So what I want to do is just propose a question for you. What kind of person do we become if Google and Apple control the greatest loves and attachments to us? What kind of a person or what kind of Christian do we become when the glow of a small screen is allowed to compete with the glory of God? When this little glowing screen is allowed, given permission to compete with the glory, what kind of a Christian do we become? I want to show this clip of, if you've ever seen this movie, it's called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Anybody seen that movie? I love that movie. It's so sweet. It's a story of a man he has such a great imagination, beautiful imagination, can throw himself into these beautiful scenarios, but he's really fearful. He's very scared. He lives in New York and he works in a small office and he imagines these great scenes of different things, but he never can quite get himself to just live life. And so Walter experiences this thing where basically he needs a photo to go into Time magazine, and there's this famous photographer where anything he shoots will be on Time magazine. Like, he is the best photographer of all time. And ultimately what happens is he loses the photograph. So he's like, I got to go find Sean, who's this photographer. I got to figure out where he is. So the story is basically Walter goes all over the world on this great adventure as a fearful being, and he blossoms into this man of courage and risk. And he leaps out of a helicopter at one point and just does these beautiful things that actually turn him from a very fearful man with great imagination to where now he's living the imagination, the kind of person he desired to be. So he ends up going to the Himalayas in the mountains where Sean is taking a photograph. And there's this beautiful scene where it's kind of like a climactic moment in this movie. And he gets to Sean, and Sean's just not concerned about the photograph. He's too in the moment. And I want to show this because I think this is such a good example of somebody who can be in the moment. Beautiful scene. There's that moment where we'll use the phone for example, where he just looks up from it. He's like, this is a distraction. He's like, I want this feeling, this moment. And as a Christian, I have to ask myself, how often am I allowing my phone to distract me from the people in my life and the God who created me? How often am I so just tireless with my desires and my hurried life to seek out something that's coming from a small glowing screen and can't look up into the eyes of both Jesus and the people I love? And I think that is one of the most beautiful moments of Hollywood history, because he misses the photograph. He's like, oh, it's gone. Missed it. But he didn't miss it. That moment lives forever in him. And I've started to, if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, Core Memories, there's this thing called Core Memories. And there's been this thing that's happened in me recently where I'm just like, I'm living for core memories, both with God and with my children and with my family. Like I'm living for these moments that I allow everything else to be quiet so I can fully absorb and attain what he has for me, to just take it in. And it looks so different for many of us. Like, I'm not going to say that it looks the same for me as it does for you. But what I do think it looks like is undistracted people. So if you have your Bibles with me, you can go to Ephesians 5. But I want to go through some statistics and things that are going on in our world right now so we can get some eyes and attention on the epidemic of what phones are doing to us. Because if we don't ask the question, what is this phone doing to me? Then we allow it to do things to you, right? Then we allow it to continue having influence in our lives that maybe in ways we shouldn't let it. So there's a thing in the animal kingdom called imprinting. I'm going to just try to move really fast so we can get towards the end of this. But there's this thing in the animal kingdom called imprinting, where when an animal is born, the first thing that it sees as the imprinted caregiver of that person. So like a baby cow, when it comes out and is born, it sees its mom and it imprints on that mom, or a baby bird to its mother. It imprints on that bird and says, "You are my mom." And from that moment forward, it looks to that person to nurture, to protect, to care for, to provide for. And I read this book recently that made me question this, where I wonder, when we wake up in the morning, Tish Warren kind of explained it this way. She's like, when we wake up in the morning, when we look at our phones, we imprint on our phones. We imprint on our phones, and then the entire rest of the day, if you're like me, your phone's right next to your bed, and first thing you do, you wake up and you might be like, okay, let's scroll a little bit, let's see what's going on. That became a very regular routine in my life. And what happens is now I'm imprinting on this phone to give to me nourishment, care, knowledge, make it so that I don't have FOMO. Okay? And here's the thing is, checking our phones has become what Tish Warren calls it, digital caffeine. It's a way we wake up to the world and feel comforted that we know what's going on. Our phones literally rescue us from FOMO. We hear chirping tweets now instead of chirping birds. And then there was this study in the University of Virginia that showed, it was a smartphone study. It showed that given the choice, many participants preferred undergoing electric shock to sitting alone with their thoughts. So they'd rather get shocked with an electrical current that's sitting alone. And the study participants would experience a mild shock, which they all reported they didn't like, and would actually pay money not to undergo again. But when left alone in an empty room with a shocker button, the participants experienced the removal from all distractions, unable to check their phones or listen to music for only 15 minutes. And 66% of men and 25% of women in the study would rather voluntarily shock themselves than sit in silence. So I had this thought: you will either become bored to death in this life, or you'll be bored into depth. You'll either be bored to death, or you'll be bored into depth. When we sit alone with our thoughts, we sit alone with Jesus. When we sit alone in silence, we allow ourselves to be confronted with every wrong thing in us, so that our Father, who speaks very silently most of the times, can speak to us in the quiet place. Why do we call it the quiet place or the secret place? Because it's shh. When Jesus said, don't stand out in front of people, go into the closet where no one is, get alone with him, and the Father who sees you in secret will reward you in secret. So that means that there's a holy hush that happens when we can come to the Lord in silence. An article in Forbes, it says, loneliness is a growing epidemic in most developed countries. Young people aged 16 to 24 feel more lonely than any other age group, including people aged 65 and over. Indeed, 73% of Gen Z reports feeling alone sometimes or always. Loneliness can be as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. And people who experience social isolation have a 32% higher risk of early death. In a strange paradox, Gen Z are hyper-connected in the virtual world, but socially disconnected. The internet, mobile phones, and video games have opened a multiverse of new connections and opportunities, yet digital interactions have failed to replace the need to connect on an emotional level in the physical world. So millennials were the last analog generation remembering life before digital technology sucked up our time. The average American will end up spending 21 years, 4 months, and 29 days online across the course of their life. Similarly to how baby boomers need to learn digital skills, we will soon have to teach Gen Z and Gen Alpha basic social skills. There's nothing new under the sun, right? The same things come to new generations in new clothes, though. Those clothes have different quantities of problems, but the problems are still the same. But what's not the same right now is the level at which we are distracted. So the social media juggernauts of Silicon Valley, which would be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, back in 2009, they developed what I would call one of the greatest evils that ever hit our planet, and that is called the algorithm. It's called the algorithm, and if you want more information on this, you can go on Netflix and you can watch The Social Dilemma. It is a terrifying Netflix documentary because you start to realize your activity on social media is not just your participation, you're actually being farmed. They're farming your data. They're using you to make a lot of money by advertisers. But if you don't know what a algorithm is, it's a complex set of rules and calculation used by social media platforms to prioritize the content that users see in their feeds. The problem with the algorithm is that it doesn't have any grace for you. The problem is when you're on your phone on social media, okay, everybody listening here, I'm going to get to what Jesus and what Paul has to say about this, but just bear with me. The problem is it's going to put in front of you what you want. And that's a problem for many of us. The algorithms typically bring to us the weakest, most anxious, least resistant version of ourselves. The version of us that is the most susceptible to any idol that can catch our attention and inevitably cause us to worship by sacrificing our time and our affection unto it. Algorithms highlight the worst part of us because it knows the worst part of us. Want me to say that one again? Algorithms highlight, expose the worst part of us because it knows the worst part of us. It also knows how to bring us the most shallow but dopamine-rich content to keep us coming back for more, which sets us on a perpetual distracted hamster wheel as addicted users who are hungry for more yet utterly exhausted from chasing after a carrot that never really delivers the life we want. We're just running. We're thinking there's more. I can keep scrolling. There's going to be something else. There's going to be another hit. There's going to be something else that makes me... You think about this, guys. I know I'm hitting this hard, but would you think about this with me for a second? In what world was somebody born to open up their phone and get the most hilarious meme of all time, and then in one swipe, get the worst, most horrific news of all time? To go from high to low in an inch of a screen, to get like the most funny content on planet Earth of somebody just biffing it wakeboarding, right? Just eating it. And you're like, yes, more of that, please. Sorry, that's my algorithm. It's just fail videos and stuff like that. But then, and then you go one more, and then you're seeing genocide happening in Africa, and you see all these terrible things happening in Israel, and it's just, you're like, how do I go from something hilarious to then Hamas kidnapping a bunch of people, parachuting in on a big EDM concert? We weren't meant to go from that to that. I'm telling you that. You weren't meant to take in that kind of information, that kind of content that takes you from high to low that quickly. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't know what's going on in the world. I 100% believe we should know. But I also wonder how much of it is a quantity issue and not a quality issue. Like, what if we're just fire hosed and we're just putting our mouth at the end of a fire hose and just taking in, and it's like you were never, ever meant for that. No generation of ever on planet Earth has ever had to endure what we endure on our phones. No one's ever had this kind of knowledge available. You might say, Ethan, you're being a really dramatic person. You're basically comparing my addiction to my phone as the same as a meth addict. And scientists actually have found that it's actually really similar. And that should scare us. We should have a healthy fear of what's happening in our pocket. I'm far less invested in you being undistracted as the data miners of social media are invested in you being distracted. Let me hear that. I'm currently far less invested in you being undistracted as social media is in you being distracted. Now, my goal is for my investment to go up for you. But I'm telling you, I have not put in the work, the man hours, the time and money and sweat and blood that Silicon Valley has put into you. And that should really intimidate you. Flannery O'Connor, she says, she once told a friend that we need to push as hard as the age that pushes against us. She also said, most of what shapes our life and culture works below the mind, in our gut and in our loves. So the question isn't, are you in the moment like Sean the photographer? The question is, are you a frantic hostage to the moment, or are you delighting in the unhurried moment? This is why we need a rule of life, both for our time and for our screen time, to keep us anchored in the things of Jesus. Is this making sense now? Okay, so what Ethan is proposing to you is not a rigid, disciplined thing that creates works-based religion. It's something that says, you know what, I actually should put boundaries in every area of my life so that my life is reorganized and orchestrated to the things of Jesus. So that every area of my life is not just happening, but I'm choosing what's happening to me. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so can we get into this? Annie Dillard, she says, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. And then John Mark Comer, I am going to just continue John Mark Comer constantly. He says, we must arrange our days, our morning routines, our daily habits, our schedules and budgets and relationships, the entire web of our lives so that we are deeply enjoying everyday life with God. This will require most of us not only to arrange our days, but also to rearrange our days from the hurried digital addiction and chronic exhaustion that we've been conditioned to believe is normal, when in reality, it's truly insane. So in order to be with Jesus and become like Jesus, we need to reorganize our lives around Jesus. And so some little things could be this: when you come into church, when you come into the place of his presence at home, when you're around the people that you love, throw this thing in the nearest pond of water as possible. I'm just kidding. Get it away so that your eyes can be on the things you need your eyes on. Here's the deal. Jesus needs your eyes. Okay, let me rephrase that. You need your eyes on Jesus. Jesus wants your gaze, okay? He wants your attention. If Jesus was here today and he was sitting here talking to you, do you know how weird it would be for you to be in this room checking social media while he's giving you scripture and life? That would reveal something deeply true about you, that you're too distracted to just take in the word, to just take in something of Jesus. I am not trying to be a bully. I'm trying to get honest, guys, because I'm telling you, this is me. I'm the type of person where I sit at dinner and I want to be checking Instagram. I want to be checking my phone. Even when my wife is talking to me and having a serious conversation, I struggle not thinking about what's calling for my name, because the reality is I can put my phone on the other side of my house and it's still going, what notification did you get? I wonder if there's a new text message. I wonder if there's a new email. Maybe something's on sale on Amazon. Right? And then they invented Apple Watches, which Bruce just reminded me of, okay? Smartwatches. Now we're carrying our phones on our wrist so we can always check, even when it's in our pocket. Oh, we need help. So Paul, I believe, writes about this. I believe he writes about how we live our lives. In Ephesians 5:15 through 21, he says, look carefully then how you walk. That word walk in the Greek is to live your life. How do you live your life? How do you behave? It's not just saying you walk funny, you have bowed knees and you walk weird. He's saying be careful how you live, how you behave. Not as an unwise person, but as wise, making the best use of time because the days are evil. What he is telling us right now, people of Fort Gratiot, Michigan, the greater area, whatever it's called, the Thumb Coast, what he is telling us right now, your time matters. And we should have a rule of life around our time. If we don't have a rule of life for our screen time, it will suck every bit of time that we have out of our lives. Okay? So he continues, he says, therefore, do not be foolish, which means being ignorant or unbelieving, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Do not get drunk with wine, for that's debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. Watch this. Be filled with the Spirit, comma, okay? That thought's continuing here. Okay, a lot of times we read that verse, we think, be filled with the Spirit, period. No, be filled with the Spirit, comma, this is what it looks like, addressing one another in psalms, in hymns, in spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, period. What does it mean to be filled with the Holy Spirit? To live your life full of singing songs, living life with the people you love, submitting to one another, mutual submission, loving each other, looking into each other's eyes, and having enough time to thank the Lord for who's in front of you and everything that's going on in life. Here's what I would confess to you. I am not an expert at this. I would love one day, like 60-year-old Ethan, to be like, that dude's an expert at the quiet life with God, like a brother Lawrence. Like, I would love that. Right now, that's not Ethan right now, okay? But that's good news for you. Why? Because there is no superpower saint. No, what John Mark Comer says, he says, there are no accidental saints. There's just purposeful people who live their life towards Jesus so that the trajectory of their life is always aimed at him. Because I'm telling you, when we get on social media, it redirects our trajectory. It redirects our affections, our desires, and who we want to be and who we want to become. And in Ephesians 5:15 in the Amplified, it says, look carefully then how you walk. Live purposefully and worthily and accurately, not as the unwise and witless, but as wise, sensible, intelligent people, making the very most of the time, buying up each opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be vague and thoughtless and foolish, but understanding and firmly grasping what the will of the Lord is. And then Paul in Philippians 4:8-9, he says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think on these. Listen here, right? True, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, worthy of praise. Think on that. Think on it. Meditate on it. Let it get in you. That's what it means. So he says, what should you be doing with your time and with the energy of your mind? Think on those things. Yeah? There was a productivity study that said that people are most efficient in the first 4 hours of their day, that they're the most productive, the most efficient, things like that, because you actually have the ability to make the most decisions. There's actually a thing that scientists have actually, that they believe to be true. It's called decision fatigue, okay? That tells me something. If instead of being imprinted by my phone, making small little decisions to start my day, what if my little decisions were redirected towards God to start my day? What if those little decisions were there at the beginning so that later in the day when I have decision fatigue, because if you're like me, you're dealing with hard personalities, you're sending hard emails, you might be getting yelled at on the phone by a vice president of a hospital who just wants to be mean. That's my world. And that decision making of dealing with conflict after conflict, big deal here, the business decisions, parenting struggles with kids who are making really bad choices, things like that. It gives decision fatigue. But what if before that fatigue set in, we set our hearts on God? What if we set our hearts on him before the world got a hold of us? And I think that's why we see Jesus and Luke constantly disappearing, constantly going to secret places to pray, to seek his Father, because he needed to set his heart on God. And if Jesus needs it, you better bet your sweet Bippy you need it. Yeah, I said it, sweet Bippy. Do I know what that means? No. I have no clue. I heard Mark Lowry say it one time, okay? A long time ago. That was like 8-year-old Ethan just came through. So so in Philippians, it's verse 9, it says, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, he then says, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Practice these things. So what do we practice? I hit on it last week. We're gonna just really get into it right now. We need to practice Sabbath, or the Jewish word is Shabbat. The best beginning step of us giving our time, including our screen time, is Sabbath. It's Shabbat with the Lord. Sabbath was a gift before it was a command. Before the Lord commanded us to rest, it was a gift to rest. Why did he command his people to rest? Because they came out of Egypt as slaves and they didn't know what rest was. And some of us, right? Here's the deal. Let me just get this out of the way right now. To many of us, this might be your Sabbath today, right? Sunday might be, this is my Sabbath. This is my day of rest. It's the most common day where most people are not working. But many of you might be working 7 days a week, every other week. You might be like, I don't even have a Sabbath some weeks. That's okay. Okay, here's what I would encourage you to. Find a time to Sabbath with the Lord. So what is Sabbath? Sabbath is giving God 1/7 of your week. Sabbath is you giving God 1/7 of your week. By giving God 1/7 of your week, you give him your whole week. That's good news. What happens when I give God 10% of my income? He gets the whole income. But you're like, no, it's only 10%. No, it proves that I give him everything. So you're like, Ethan, I don't have enough time. Give him some of it. Give him 1/7, and he gets the whole thing. Because that 1/7 sets you on the course the rest of your week to be with him. So what is Sabbath? Jesus said, Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. So what does that mean? Let me give you Ethan's translation. Ethan's translation of Sabbath. Sabbath was designed with you in mind. That means Sabbath was designed and created for you, with you in mind, in your design. So what is Sabbath? Sabbath, we see it in the Bible as a time of rest, but it's not just a time of rest. I think in Greco-Roman Christian culture, we take it as, okay, Sabbath is just me not working. It's not just that. In the Jewish culture, Sabbath is rest, it's worship, it's joy, it's family, and it's delighting in God. It's so much more multidimensional than just don't do anything. No, you're doing something. Yeah. It's still active participation in something. It's not just not working. It's delighting in the Lord. So when he says to Sabbath, do you understand for Jews, when he said Sabbath, it was both to rest and to look forward to what was coming, that the Messiah was to come in. So as Christians, when we Sabbath, when we rest on a day of Sabbath, we rest in the enough, everything that God gave us. It's enough, and we look forward to the coming of Jesus. Isn't that wonderful? And so Sabbath was created to experience rest with God in great anticipation of the rest that will come when the Lord returns. Sabbath is God saying that things are good and enough. So when God rested on the seventh day, when he rested, he said, this is good and it's enough. Because he could have kept going and going. He wasn't saying, well, I'm tired now. That was a lot of work, right? He wasn't like, oh my gosh, whoo, the Milky Way was a real day today, right? He wasn't saying that. He was like, wow, this is good and enough. It's complete. And he also wasn't like a manager who just looks at it and goes, okay, yep, 100%, yeah, it's good. Okay, next one, yeah, that's good. No, he delighted in it. He basked in it. Like he stepped down into our world and said, I delight in you. What does that mean for you? Before you did anything for him, he goes, I like you. I delight in my creation. I like you. I don't just love you. I like you. But I didn't do anything. Exactly. There's this whole different world of reality that just opened up to me the other day, that in the Jewish world, the day starts at nighttime. It doesn't start like when you're like, okay, time to get this day started. It doesn't start at 8 a.m. in the morning. Their day starts at like 6 p.m. or when the sun's setting. That's when their day starts. I was talking to Lydia about it, and I'm like, yeah, their day starts with rest. It doesn't start with work. I'm like, their day starts with sleep. And I was telling Lydia, she's like, but what? So when do you, I'm like, exactly. When do you work? Right? It's like we are programmed to think my day starts when I work. My day starts when I make breakfast for my kids. My day starts when I do. And in the Jewish belief system, it's the opposite. My day starts when my day is enough. What does that do? It postures your heart to look at everything ordinary in your life and to go, it's enough. My family's enough. My home is enough. My children, they're enough. I don't need anything more. What I have is enough. And then we hear this from Michael and Larissa Miller. They say, if I need it, I'll have it. If I don't have it, I don't need it. Come on, guys. What a different posture than to be on this and just going, I need more. But what happens in Sabbath is it brings us to a place of rest. And Dallas Willard, he says, God is the most joyful being in the entire universe. He's the most joyful being in the entire universe. So when I Sabbath, I am resting with the most joyful person that ever existed. But here's the deal. Many of us struggle with Sabbath. And Ruth Haley Barton, she says it this way. We struggle with Sabbath because in Sabbath, we face our resistance, our distance from God, and our lack of desire for God. And so I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about this. A lot of times we get to Sabbath and we're like, okay, what do I do here? I already said it's rest, it's worship, it's play, it's rejoicing, it's taking in the delight of the Lord. But a lot of times we get to it and then we realize, I have a real lack of desire for you, God. If we're being truly honest and real with ourselves, sometimes we get, okay, but here's the deal. If you've been seasoned in this, this is not true about you. But if you're new to this, this might be true about you. So when you come into the presence of the Lord on a Sabbath, you're like, okay, I'm not supposed to do anything but delight. Ethan says to love him, to seek him, and delight. Well, how do I do this? How do I do? And then you realize it's not. It's me delighting in him as he delights in me. Or as John Mark Comer says, it's me looking at him, looking at me in love. And the reason why that's hard is because setting time aside for God will quite often be avoided, because when we get there, we come to find out there's very little between us. At least at first. At the beginning, we usually find out we've been dating God through other people rather than marrying God ourselves. It can feel like a really awkward first date where you don't know what you should be talking about or what you should be doing or participating in. But over time, you find out that you and God are deeply compatible to one another. Oh, we are deeply compatible with God. Why? Because of Jesus. Because of what Jesus did. Jesus made you compatible. So it's only awkward when you realize you haven't been delighting yourself in God and his creation, but that he has been delighting in you the entire time. So it's awkward because we come into the Sabbath, we say, this day's yours. And he goes, I've been waiting. I've been delighting. And we're like, oh, I don't even know how to delight in you. And he's like, it's okay. I know how to delight in you. And we actually learn from looking at him, looking at us. We learn of him by taking 1/7 of our week and saying, this day is designed to slow me down so that I can see you looking at me in love. And then guess what happens? Now, as a dad, okay, or moms or husbands, wives, single people, now you can go outside, leave your phone in the dust, and you can walk in creation and go, man, God, these trees are amazing. Like the trees look like lungs. They're like, they blow in the wind. You can't see the wind, but yet everything in creation is just saying, there's a creator. The birds are singing your praise. Like I'm telling you, this is what my prayer life looks like. I walk in my orchard and I just go, wow, Lord, that eagle is so amazing. And you brood over me, Lord. It, like everything in creation begins to remind you of Jesus when you take the time to let that happen. Okay? It's not works. Okay? But here's what happens is that there's something called the J curve of improvement. Like when you start trying to learn violin or a new hobby or something, there's this J curve of improvement where when you start here and you almost get worse before you get better. That's real. It's real. Scientists have proven it's like most of the time you get worse at something before you get better. And here's what happens is most Christians come into their secret time with the Lord or their Sabbath and they get with God and they start and things get worse. And it's not the enemy, okay? It could be, maybe, but like here's the deal. It gets worse not because like God's not near. It's because you're so jarred, like shell-shocked, but from leaving the chaos and insanity of your week and coming into utter tranquility, and you're like, I just wish I had a shocker right now to just zap me out of this. I can't even handle, like when I went to ministry school, I couldn't even handle being alone with my own thoughts. Why? Because my thoughts were attacking me. Like my own thoughts were so self-defeating and beating myself up. The idea of not being busy with friends terrified me because me being alone, I betrayed myself. And so here's that J curve. That J curve, sometimes it's just you get with the Lord and you start to posture yourself and you start to like deal with this like, God, I don't think I like me, let alone you. Can we get honest? Like it's kind of hard to love somebody when you don't even love yourself. But here's what happens is when we get honest with God and vulnerable, and we get into his presence, we sit with him and go, God, I don't even know if I like me. You start to hear the small whisper of, but I love you. You start to say, I don't even like the person I've become. That's okay. I'm making you new. I feel old. I feel dirty. I'll clean you up. Dude, come on, guys. This is the gospel. The Sabbath reminds us of the gospel. The Shabbat, you're like, man, this is weird. I'm a Christian. I've never heard these Jewish terms. This is the Jewish rabbi we follow. He is a rabbi of Shabbat, a rabbi of slowed, unhurried life who can bring you into his presence and make you new. And I'm not trying to hype you up right now. I'm just giving you bread to say, would you come and meet Jesus? And would you let him take over? Would you let him just take those thoughts out of you? Dan Allender in his book Sabbath says this. Listen to this quote. This quote will knock your socks off, okay? When I first heard it, I was like, goodness gracious. This is what the Christian life offers. He says in his book, Sabbath, the Sabbath is an invitation to enter delight. The Sabbath, when experienced as God intended, is the best day of our lives. Without question or thought, it is the best day of the week. It is the day we anticipate on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and the day we remember on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Sabbath is the holy time where we feast, we play, we dance, we have sex, we sing, we pray, we laugh, we tell stories, we read, paint, walk, and watch creation in its fullness. Few people are willing to enter Sabbath and sanctify it, to make it holy, because a full day of delight and joy is more than most people can bear in a lifetime, let alone 1 week. It's too much to bear in a whole lifetime, and yet doing it every week, you're like, Ethan, that's too good to be true. That's what the gospel means. It means it's good news, that there's actually truth to be had. There's joy and delight to be had. And what Paul says is even in the worst of situations, even when we go through trials, we rejoice. What does that tell me? This thing is resistant. It is strong. It is not passive, like, oh, well, I can Sabbath when I'm having a good week, when my head's straight, when my mind's straight. No, it makes your head and your mind straight. It readjusts you. It's the chiropractor of your week, adjusting you for your week. Come on. Isn't that good? So, a rule of life for our time. I said this last week. We can put it up on the screen. We're landing the plane right now. A rule of time. I am a reorganized person who prioritizes the important things. Really, this is like a goal. It's a goal. It's a boundary. I'm a reorganized person who prioritizes the important things in life over the hurried things through the practices of Sabbath, solitude, and prayer. I organize my life around Jesus and his way so that he can teach me how to spend my time rightly with him, with his disciples, in every community that he loves. So it doesn't always even just mean Sabbath, go be by yourself. What it meant for me yesterday was our Sabbath. What we do on our Sabbath is we put our phones away. The only time we use our phone is to make calls or to send texts. That's it. And if we get a text that leads us into chaos or into work mode, we leave it alone. We're not looking at it. But if it's family, if it's people that we love, that we're in community with, that is something we engage with. But we leave our phones inside. Yesterday, we just spent the day outside. We went to a soccer game. Then we were outside. And then we went to Flames Gym. It wasn't just rest. It was delighting in my kids. It was me playing on the trampoline with my kids. Okay? And here's the thing. We get really religious. We say it has to look like rest. It has to. What if rest is you enjoying life? What if it's you in deeply and utterly enjoying life and the people around you and seeing God in Jacob and seeing God in Lily and seeing God in your wife or your family and just looking around and being like, oh my gosh, like this is life. And guess what that is? That's worship. Why is it worship? It's what we said this morning. I'm declaring your steadfast love to start my day. And by the end, I get to go to sleep and I go, God, you're so faithful. You're so faithful. Does it mean that I didn't get frustrated with my kids at all yesterday? Like I was telling Nate, there was a moment where it felt like our whole family was like meth addicts. Like, because we do no screens, no TVs, nothing. Like it's, when Sabbath happens, they're like, is it Sabbath? And they're both like, yay, and they're like, at the same time, because they're like, yay, our parents are present. So they look forward to it. You would think, no, these kids who walk around with tablets and have screens available, you would think they'd be like, I don't like that. No, they love it because now they're not competing with their parents in their phones. Okay? And so yesterday morning, they get up and they're like, I don't know what to do. Oh my gosh. What do I do? And I'm telling you, they're looking at me like, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? They're like tweaking on the street, just like, oh my gosh. If that's the word. Yeah, they're like, I need stimulation, right? And I'm telling you, over time, even me, I get up in the morning, I'm like, whoo, coffee time. Give me something. I need my mind to be doing something. And honestly, that's all it is, guys. It's the need for your mind to be filled with noise, filled with doing things. And then when you're left at your kitchen table with your kids in silence, you start to think, when did we pray last? When did I talk to you about Sabbath? When did I talk to you about Jesus last? When did I prophesy over you? When did I encourage you? When did I pray for you? When did I teach you to pray for each other? Okay, I know this is for parents, but married couples looking at each other across the kitchen table going, we should pray together. Can I pray for you? Like, so much gets solved in the Christian life when we just remove the noise and we welcome the noise of the Father. So much. And here's the deal. They say that people only remember about 20% of the message. So you might walk out of here and go, and all you might remember is Ethan said phones are bad and I should Sabbath. That's all you need to remember. That's all you need to remember. But that remembering has to, as John Mark Comer says, work its way into an organization of your life, rearranging your life around Jesus. If it's just up here, it's doing nothing for you. If we are preaching messages to you and it stays up here and it doesn't work its way into your body, it's doing nothing for you. You understanding me? It's not enough to come to church and be like, yeah, I got a good ear tickle, and I liked how Ethan spoke. I like Nate better. Kate does really good, right? It's not enough just to be like, I just like the speaking there. It's amazing. No, you have to hear it. It's got to get in you. Then it's got to get out of you. Otherwise, when you go out into your workplace, the people that are working at you that you're working with, they look at you and go, why would I want what you have? It's not doing anything for you. It looks exactly the same. You're just as stressed out about what just happened to Donald Trump as everybody else. Come on. Or you're celebrating it just as much as anybody else. If it's disrupting you, come on, I don't want to get into that. If what's happening on here is ruining your day, there's your faith. Therein lies where your faith is invested. I understand that there's some weird things going on right now in our country. I get it. I know it. But I'm telling you, you getting freaked out about it and not spending time with the Lord and resting and delighting in Him, it's not doing anything for you. It's not changing anything. Prayer, solitude, seeking the Lord, fasting, that does. That does. But you freaking out and then getting on Twitter, let's just make a community decision right now. Your social media is not your journal. It's not your journal. Nobody needs to know what's going on inside of you in those ways. Like when I hear people just on social media and just I'm just having such a bad day. Things are so terrible, blah, 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 blah. How is it helping you? Come on, people giving you empathy on social media, it's not real empathy. It's not. You know what's real? Getting coffee with someone that loves you and them saying, man, you sound like you're really sorry for yourself. But Jesus is empowering you, girl. He's empowering you. This shouldn't take over your day. This shouldn't take over your whole life. Yeah. You should be able to rise above. Here's how we do it. Right? That's the kind of friends you want. You don't want the kind of friends who are like, oh man, I'm just so sorry to hear that you're going through things. Yeah, sadness from inside. I'm sad with you. That's not the kind of friend you want. It's okay to mourn with your friends when they're mourning. It's not okay when they are just burdened by the world to just say, yeah, there's no way out. It's our job to pull it off and say, that's not weight you're supposed to be carrying. That's not the mindset that you should be carrying. Get it off of you. It's a demon. Yes? Okay. Sabbath is the rest that gives the 1/7 of our week to the Lord. It postures you for the rest of your week. And guess what? If you get into that rhythm, 1/7, here it comes. I just finished Sabbath yesterday. I'm already looking forward to the next one. But that means the rest of my week, I'm just thinking, I'm going to be with the Lord, with my family, delighting in him. I don't want to do anything that will disrupt that this week. This is where sin starts to get tamed down. Where this whole thing is not just about not sinning, but you become someone who doesn't sin by looking forward to your time with the Lord, and you start to realize, I don't want to get into anything that when I get into his presence, I'm only going to be thinking of that. I'm only going to be thinking of the time I gossiped, or the time that I looked at this, or the time that I spoke so poorly about this person. And the Lord's like, hey, you're here. And you're like, yeah, I'm here. We don't need to talk about any of that. He's like, no, we do. Here we are. Here's the deal, guys. That whole we don't marry him. Lydia knows everything going in me. She knows. When I get off, she knows. She knows when I will tell her, I just feel off right now. And she knows. Okay? God should know. And that's that whole Sabbath thing. When you walk into Sabbath, you should be naked. Okay? Keep your clothes on. Okay? It's Adam and Eve, though. They walked in the cool of the day, vulnerable and open, so that God could see everything in them. And guess what that did? It did more for them than it did for God. Yeah. They could walk in freedom and lightness and the easy yoke that Jesus talks about. Okay, so how do we do this? We have Sabbath 1 day a week. So here's the question you need to ask yourself right now. What 1/7 or what 1 day of the week will I give to God? Okay, for me, it's Saturdays. For you, it could be Sundays. But for me, on Sundays, I'm basically working. Okay, so this is work right now. I love that I get to speak to you. I love that I get to open myself up to you. But this is like work for me. Okay, so my Sabbath is on Saturdays. Yours could be Sundays. Yours might be Fridays. You might be like, yeah, I'm doing the full Jewish thing. Friday night is when I start. Oh, yeah, we do Friday night to Saturday night. Yeah, Friday night, 6 p.m., and Saturday, 6 p.m. So yesterday night at 6 p.m., you know what we were all doing? It was 6 p.m. Oh, gosh, we made it. I wonder if anybody Instagrammed me and sent a message to me. Oh, yes. Nobody did, thank God. Right? But our kids were like, it's screen time, go! It's like they came up out of water right? So here's the deal. We want to get away from that, right? We want to be trained up in the Lord and not be that way. But that's what it was. But you got to pick your day. And what will you do to keep it holy and undistracted? So for us, it's no screen time, no screens of any kind. Okay? So yes, we use our phone for phone and text messages. So yes, there is a screen involved still. But I'm being open and transparent with you. I'm not going to say, oh, well, you texted me yesterday. Liar, right? Okay, so we still use our texts and we still use phones. But here's the deal. If you are somebody who are I'm inundated with work texts, work calls, and you just can't escape it. But if that's what you need to just fully remove it, then put your phone away to fully remove yourself from work. Okay, so what will you do to keep it full of joy and delight? So here's another thing. When you Sabbath, what will you do to have fun? Will it be having somebody over for dinner? Like David and Jan just came over and made the best cheesecake ever. I housed it, pounded it. It's already gone. I ate cheesecake 3 days in a row. That was joy and delight. Okay? Come on. Okay, but like it's just asking yourself, what am I going to do to fill my day with joy and delight? And that doesn't mean spending money or going into Target and spending a just insane amount of money. It could mean I'm going to go on a walk with my family, and as I walk, I'm going to thank the Lord for each one of my kids. I'm going to internally make a core moment, right? Those core memories. I'm going to soak it in, just like the photographer. I'm going to put everything down, and I'm just going to be here. I want to stay in it right here, right now. I want everything this moment has to offer me. I want to soak it in like a sponge. Okay? Is this tracking? Okay? Then we need to parent our phone through the week. Okay? Parent your phone. For me, we put our kids to bed, right? We put our kids to bed at 8. When I put my kids to bed at 8, I put my phone to bed. And our bedroom is on one side of the house. I put my phone now on the other side of the house. It used to be where my friends would text us and they'd be like, oh, you didn't text back. I'm like, yeah, I fell asleep again. I fall asleep so early. But now I'm not texting back because I'm conscious, but not with my phone. Okay, so I put my phone on the other side of my house. Turning off your phone in the sacred and beautiful ordinary moments of life. Okay? So turning it off. When I'm going to go spend time reading the Bible, get rid of your Apple Watch, get rid of your phone, be with Jesus without a notification. If you don't have a paper Bible, you need a paper Bible. That's not a like, oh, you should. No, you need one. I'm not saying that if you're using your YouVersion Bible right now that it's wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But paper Bibles, guess what they don't do? Bing, notification. Bing, notification. Bing. It doesn't have any notifications. It's analog. You know what that means, Bear? It doesn't have any digital in it. Okay? So get a paper Bible and spend time with the Lord without your phone. If you're going on a walk, leave your phone. Leave it in your house. Leave it in your car. Last thing. This is something that I've started to do, and you can do it too, but I'm just trying to give multiple tips. Delete social media, either entirely or do what I do, one day a week. Delete it off my phone Wednesdays or Mondays. I'm checking, okay, check. Do I have any more things? Do I want to post any photos from my little camera? Oh, no? Okay, cool. Delete. Now we're done. Make it momentary. Don't make it constant. Some of you are like, yeah, I'm out. Never come back to this church again. Yeah, right? Find ways to create boundaries and strategies. And I'm just telling you, the whole screen time app, oh yeah, I'll use the screen time app and I'll make it so it kicks me out of the app. And it's not real, dude. Maybe it is for you. I have less self-control than you do, apparently. You can just bypass it with a quick little passcode that you made. You made the passcode. That's not a real password. You're like, it'll kick me out, don't worry. You're like, boop, 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 I'm back in. It's like all you did was make a hurdle and now it's just unnecessary work. Okay, so just find ways to remove yourself from your phone. And I don't know the next time that I'm gonna speak on phones, but I'm telling you, this is probably the biggest thing. I don't know that we need to say more about it. I just think we need to create rules of life around our Christian faith that prevents the world and culture from getting in. Okay? This is a countercultural thing happening in here, and you need to understand that. What we are doing is counterculture. The world is saying, speed up, do more, check your notifications. You need more. Jesus is saying, no, die, less is more. It's counter the culture. And we need to understand that. And I think that's something for myself I have not understood. We have to understand we should be doing things in our life that is counter the way that the world is living. And if you find yourself doing Instagram the way the world does it, yeah. Feel that? So how many of you guys made it through the whole service with your phone off? Okay. Were you okay? Did you make it? Okay. That anxiety that came up, you know what I'm talking about. That feeling of like, whoo, mama. Okay. That feeling you had, what we're trying to do right now is prune that out of us. And that doesn't happen just with a one-time thing. It happens with a lifestyle that begins to remove the need to be in a hurry to know what's going on. okay? So it's not just going to be Ethan spoke to me and now I'm free of this. It's going to be you putting into practice the things that Paul talked about, of living your life and thinking on the things that the Lord wants you thinking on, by living in Sabbath, by doing prayer, by doing solitude. But it's not those things transforming you. It's those things that are leading you to the feet of Jesus who transforms you. Yep. Amen. Okay, thank you, Jesus. Lord, would you just complete this in us? Would you do something miraculous in us, Lord? Lead us to be a countercultural people that are being led by the way, you, Jesus, the living bread and word of God. And would you lead us to your feet, Jesus? Transform us, make us new. In Jesus' name, amen. We love you guys.